Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the WatchRolling.com podcast, a veteran-owned podcast that focuses on watch collecting with the goal of helping veterans. My name is Jason, and I'm your host. And in last week's episode, we had a brief discussion about the new Swatch and Omega collaboration, the Moon Swatch. I think I'm going to score the Mercury piece. I just really want to get my hands on it. In this week's episode, we're going to discuss the Veteran Administration's implementation of the PAWS Act for veterans, and we'll also have my take on snobbery in the watch collecting sphere. I'm hoping that by covering the PAWS Act, it puts a little bit of perspective into the watch collecting hobby. For myself, I know it already did. So in veteran-related news, we're going to cover the PAWS Act, the PAWS Act pilot program. On March 30th, the VA released an article, which I will share in the links, sharing the implementation plan and locations of the Puppies Assisting Wounded Service Members Act, or Pilot Act, or the PAWS Act. I'll have links to the VA article, the Federal Register, and the public law in the show notes. It's pretty interesting stuff. So what is the PAWS Act? Well, it's a 5-year pilot program. It provides canine training to eligible veterans diagnosed with PTSD as an element of a complementary and integrative health program. And that's verbatim from the VA press release. So basically, a 5-year pilot program. They're going to test it out, see what they can do, provide actual service dogs, which you read later in the article, not emotional therapy dogs, but service dogs to eligible veterans. So I looked up the eligible veteran enrollment information, and it's pretty lengthy and detailed. So I'll just kind of paraphrase it, but I'm going to provide the U.S. code sections and the CFR sections so you can actually read it and understand it in its totality. But to paraphrase, to participate in the pilot, a veteran must meet 3 threshold conditions for eligibility. Namely, the veteran must be, number 1, enrolled in the VA healthcare system, number 2, diagnosed with PTSD, and 3, recommended by a VA mental health care provider or VA clinical team. So 3, I would say pretty standard things if you've already gotten enrolled in the system. If you're not enrolled in the system, or you know a veteran that's not enrolled in the system, let me know in the comments section, and I can post some stuff about getting someone actually enrolled in the VA. I know people that were Vietnam veterans that never enrolled in the system, and 50 years later, they were able to enroll. So it's possible to do. You might have to do a little bit of researching to get their paperwork and stuff like DD-214s and such, but it can be done. So if you know someone that doesn't qualify right away, it doesn't mean they can't do it. You might just have to get the paperwork to get them to be able to do it, but reach out to me and I can help give you some pointers in that. So the write-up for the eligibility, that was the verbatim paraphrase from the Federal Register page. I recommend, again, anyone that's interested, go check out the links I provided in the show notes. Currently, there are 5 locations selected for the program: Anchorage, Alaska, Asheville, North Carolina, Palo Alto, California, San Antonio, Texas, and West Palm Beach, Florida. So there's going to be clinicians at each site location who will determine the eligibility of the veteran interested in the program. One special note I read about this is that the training hasn't been finalized yet for the veterans and the dogs, but if you're a veteran that participates in the program, there will be the opportunity for you to help train future service dogs in the program. I think that's pretty cool. You get to lay out the groundwork on how everything goes. You can provide some feedback, probably. I'd have to believe they're going to take feedback on the program to kind of tweak it and get it right. And then going forward, you can give back to the program that gave something to you. So I think that's pretty cool. And, while the program is in the pilot phase, I can see this being the potential for real benefit to veterans afflicted with PTSD. I mentioned in the last episode, I have a dog, just a standard dog, and he's pretty helpful when stuff can get kind of bad. He's pretty helpful just being there. He's not even trained to do anything other than just to eat some treats. All items featured in the veterans news section, please pass this on to anyone you might know who qualifies. Again, I'm putting all the details in the show notes. It was kind of a short write-up. There's much more in there, but I don't want to get down into code of federal regulations and United States code and all that stuff, because I'm pretty sure that's not what you showed up for. But I will put them all in the show notes. So in watch-related news, I wanted to address the topic of snobbery and watch snobbery in the watch collecting sphere. And it was something I didn't even really know existed, but I know it happens across other hobbies as well. I've seen it, whether it's comic book collecting or, I don't know, collecting Beanie Babies or something. There's always this whole kind of thing. Before we get started, I wanted to give a big shout out. They're not a sponsor or anything, but I wanted to say thank you to Merriam-Webster Dictionary for providing the quote and always giving a good definition. I've used them a million times in my life, and that's where I went this time to get the official definition of snob because I didn't want to go off the top of my head with that. What I did discover about the word snob is pretty interesting, and I think it applies well to the concept of snobbery in the watch collecting hobby. So, snob's a noun. It's kind of funny. The first definition they provide is British, and it's cobbler, so someone that makes shoes. I didn't look that up yet, but I really want to look it up. The second definition is very interesting. It's one who blatantly imitates, fondly admires, or vulgarly seeks attention with those regarded as social superiors. Keep that one in mind for later. And then the other two definitions are one who tends to rebuff, avoid, or ignore those regarded as inferior, or one who has an offensive air of superiority in matters of knowledge or taste. And I think the last two definitions are definitely the first ones I thought about when I thought about someone being kind of a snob. So just something to think about. As a newish watch collector, one of the first things I noticed were the lines of demarcation between collectors and content creators, and sometimes the both, because we all know not all content creators are watch collectors, not all watch collectors are content creators. And some of these lines of demarcation I noticed initially, and I've noticed since then, are price points and exclusivity. You know what I mean? Like, so once you get used to a certain price point status, maybe you don't go down below that. I know that's not always true because I've seen people who have great like Instagram feeds, for example, and they have a Rolex Submariner, which is, entry level luxury. It's a very nice piece. And they also have like Casio G-Shock or an F91W, and they love them both. So I'm not applying this wholesale to anybody. I'm just saying I've seen that as one sticking point is a price point or exclusivity. Like there's limited editions, et cetera, et cetera. Horological significance. I've seen this as well in the hobby, the little bit of time I've been in it, that there are people who are really stuck on how significant is this timepiece that I own in the grand scheme of horology, which I totally get. I mean, let's say you're a real engineer or you're, a historian by trade. I totally get that point, and I'm not poo-pooing any of these sticking points. I'm just saying that these are some of the ones I've seen. I've also seen brand loyalty, and an interesting one that I didn't really think about until I've ran across some different podcasts and media feeds is lifestyle, right? Like certain watches are presented in a certain lifestyle. And if you wear that watch, but don't do that stuff in the lifestyle, you're not really in the lifestyle. So those are the four that I came up with. They're really five. And in some cases, you get a cool Venn diagram between two of the three areas, right? So for example, some collectors are loyal to a brand, but only a brand at a certain price point, or maybe price point brand and then exclusivity. Like this one, there's only 300 of, and we have number 150. As I discussed earlier in the last episode, we talked about the Swatch Omega Moon Swatch collaboration. And I feel like maybe it's because I've only been doing this for about 2 years, but I felt like that just really nailed it home for me. I've heard content definitely in this category, and I think the release just really brought it to my attention. And the takes from people were coming fast and furious, and I'm going to say they were coming up and down. I don't even like this term, but social ladder, I guess. I mean, maybe someone in the comments can give me a better phrase for that, but up and down the ladder from people who only collect higher end pieces and more expensive pieces and people that collect, more affordable pieces. But I saw these takes coming from both sides about the Moon Swatch, and I thought it was funny because some people who praised Swatch's place in the industry all of a sudden reversed course when they realized it collabed with Amiga and vice versa. So I've seen some people who were all over Amiga, but the second that they collaborated with Swatch, it was like, oh no, and you'd see stuff like someone was going like, oh, a Swatch is cool. Look how well so-and-so pairs a System 51 with their outfit. But then they turned around and played down the watch once they realized, they did a collaboration and made the Moon Swatch. I mean, it was just kind of funny. It's like Swatch was cool for 1 second, but then all of a sudden they paired with Amiga and they weren't cool, and vice versa. And to me as a new watch collector, I'm being honest. I mean, someone can correct me if they want to in the comments or, share their point of view with me. I'm always open to discussion. But as a new collector, that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, either Swatch is cool or it isn't, right? I mean, as watch collectors, we make those wholesale comments like people say, oh, some of these fashion watches, they're just not cool. Or Omega's cool. And to me, it's like, well, Omega's cool. Swatch is cool. If they make a watch or a series of watches, Well, then they're cool, right? I mean, they made 11 watches. It doesn't mean all 11 are going to be in our taste alley. You know what I mean? But the concept, overall concept of the watch is either cool or it's not, right? And I mean, I know a lot of the punditry went on and everybody gave their opinion, myself included last week. But I mean, if you take a look at it, look how many people showed up to get those watches. Now I know they're going to say people are going to say a lot of them were flippers and stuff, but I got to believe that maybe the flippers and the real watch collectors were like, I don't know, this is improper math, 60-40 split, waiting in line early. But those people that got in line probably later and weren't lining up overnight were just regular people who are interested in getting a cool watch. I wish someone had done some deep dive analysis and just went and polled everybody in line. I mean, I don't know if the watch flippers would have been honest about it, but done some kind of count and broke down some metrics or some statistics on what people were in line to get the watches. But I think overall the public kind of spoke when the watches came out and said, "Oh, these are pretty cool pieces." So, all this hubbub over the Moon Swatch has reinforced in me a desire to not look down on anyone's taste in watches. And I'll be honest, I started curving that way. Like, it was kind of weird. Like, I'd have friends at work talk about, "Oh yeah, I saw this cool watch," and I'd ask them what it was, and they'd say it was a Fossil. And I really went back and forth, for example, Fossil being an example of how trying to explain to them, how do I explain to them that it might be an attractive watch, but A, it's probably based on something else, and B, the movement is a movement that you can get probably wholesale for a couple dollars. And I just went back and forth for a while, and I didn't want to make anybody feel bad, but I also didn't want anyone that I knew on a personal level to go out and purchase something for X amount of dollars, knowing that they could get something much, better. And I know that's even a subjective term, but let's just say technically better with a little more provenance and stuff for equal, if not less money. So I just come to the point now where it's like, if you like a piece for you, then I like it for you too. It's that simple. I mean, I'm putting it on record right now that you're not going to hear me just talk down about anybody's stuff. Have fun. Put on your wrist what you want to put. I mean, it's you. You're working hard for your money. Who am I to tell you anything different? I do think that the Omega or the Swatch Omega collaboration is a pretty cool collaboration. And I just go back to this same thing all the time. A watch like this at this price point can help people who can't afford the higher end, more expensive pieces to get a taste of the design and to get a taste of the feeling of what it's like to own one of those. I know plenty of people who are serious watch collectors I've got to know the last 2 years who have put Omega Speedmasters on and are like, yeah, it's not my cup of tea. And they spent thousands of dollars to figure out that that's not their cup of tea. And if you were a young person or a newer watch collector who is, you have a tighter budget, well, you could buy that Mission to the Moon watch. And yeah, I know it's not metal and it's not going to feel exactly the same, but I mean, come on. If I took a cruddy enough picture, some people may not be able to tell the difference between a moon watch proper and this Omega Moon Swatch that was the Mission to the Moon. I know most experienced watch collectors could, but we're talking about new watch collectors, people who maybe don't have a whole lot of cash or just aren't interested in watches, but they're interested in that watch. So I go back to definition number 2, where they talk about, wanting to be up in that higher society. And I don't even like that term so much, but I'm going to be honest about it. Like, I don't own one of those more expensive pieces. For me, I'd have to have a plan before getting one. I'd have to touch one. I'd have to really make sure that this is something I want. It's not something I'm going to order online or, order sight unseen. And if someone's being a watch snob, maybe it's because they own a luxury timepiece, but they're not actually living that luxury lifestyle. And maybe that's why they're being a watch snob. You know what I mean? Maybe they're afraid that something that they had that set them apart, in their mind, they don't have it anymore. But I mean, if you're being honest, I mean, it's a Moon Swatch. It's a Speedmaster, it's not your Speedmaster. And it's like, if I'm driving, I don't know, name anything, an entry level Mercedes, and you're driving the 600 series. I mean, I still got a Mercedes, but I'm not driving your 600 Mercedes. But maybe if I drove that entry level Mercedes, it gives me a taste, and I aspire to one day have the 600 series Mercedes. And the only other thing I want to say is, when it comes to this watch snobbery, it's not just one way. I've been watching this for a minute. It goes up and down the ladder. There are people who will say, why do I need to spend that amount of money? Blah 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 blah. When I could get this for that. Well, I mean, I guess it's true, but it's not really true. And just because you're not at a level yet doesn't mean you should come down on those people. And just because you were at a perceived higher level with your watch collecting, you shouldn't put anybody else down for what they like either. At the end of the day, you're not wearing what they're wearing. They can wear whatever they want. And that applies to everybody. So I just want to make sure that going forward that I'm much more open-minded. I could see that I was kind of getting a little closed-minded when it came to price point, etc. So I'm just going to be a little more fair-minded about it. And that's a promise I make to you as my community. You know what I mean? Bring whatever you got. I want to see it. Tell me what you like about it. And funny little thing, I saw a watch on a review channel this week from a company I never thought I would have wanted, but the person's video made me understand the difference between a homage and a homage to a watch that hasn't been made in 40 years. So would you poo-poo the homage for a watch that you can't get, that hasn't been made for 40 years, that's now $30,000? Or, for me, it's like, oh, I could have got that piece and really enjoy it, So going forward, bring what you want, wear what you want. I'm going to help you enjoy it, and I'm going to appreciate it with you. So appreciate you turning in for episode 3. I know those were kind of interesting topics. I always find the more I do this podcast that the veteran topic and the watch collecting topic, sometimes they're diametrically opposed, and sometimes they align up pretty well. But I thought it was kind of cool. We had puppies and then watch snobbery, and it was interesting. Next week's episode, we'll highlight an article in the latest edition of the Disabled American Veterans, or the DAV magazine, discussing some fiscal year 22 additions to the defense spending bill and how they might benefit veterans. I then highlight some of my favorite watch collecting Instagram feeds, so stay tuned. I always close with a positive affirmation, so I just want to leave you with, it's easy to dream. It's easy to set goals. What's not easy is turning your dreams into goals and accomplishing them, and then realizing that you're still not done yet. So go get some, watch fam. You deserve to work hard for yourself. And remember, at watchrolling.com, you make the watch. The watch doesn't make you.